Hey everyone, today is an exciting day because we are going to be doing my first video in my series about the What Would Stoner Do, at least my first review in this process of testing out my kind of loose approximation of a What Would Stoner Do carbine. Today we're going to be focused on kind of the heart and soul of this thing, the KE Arms KP-15, their polymer lower. Now, anyone who has known me for any length of time will know that I have been a huge naysayer of polymer lowers in the past. Fast forward to a couple years ago, I was introduced to the What Would Stoner Do project that InRange TV was doing in conjunction with Ian over at Forgotten Weapons. And I still was kind of not terribly excited about it. And then as the project went on and I saw more and more, I became more and more interested. And then I finally had to make the plunge myself. And then when, by that time, the G-Wax lowers were no longer available. However, then I've heard KE Arms was doing theirs. So I actually pre-ordered one of these myself through Brownells. The store I work for is also now a dealer for, well, carries these through RSR. But before I knew that was going to happen, I went ahead, put my money where my mouth is literally, and decided to pre-order one of these. And I have been running this thing quite a bit, including through a class now. This thing has just over 1,000 rounds through it, which is why I feel like it is probably time for me to do my review. Obviously, 1,000 rounds is not an exhaustive test of a lower. However, I feel like I have a pretty good idea of where things are going. If there needs to be an update video at some point in the future, I will make that when appropriate. If that does happen, check a pinned comment down below. If you don't see one there, until then, it'll probably be the best comment I get will be pinned. Best is being a subjective term that I will decide on the spot. So what I wanted to do is run through what this lower is, how I have it configured, and kind of what my thoughts are on it overall. So what is it? This thing obviously is a completely polymer lower. Now, like I said, I've been naysayers of these in the past. The issue there being when you try to take an aluminum lower and just take that blueprint and make that same thing out of polymer, you run into a lot of issues. A lot of people that have come into the store where I work that have polymer lowers run into many of those issues, i.e. parts cracking, typically back here where the receiver extension would thread in. They try to fix that with having like metal reinforcement in the threads there. But even then, this little junction here where the rear takedown pin is typically will break open. Lots and lots and lots of other issues. There's endless forums about that. So I won't beat that to death too much, but basically, long story short, don't buy polymer lowers unless it's one of these. So what does this thing do differently? So first of all, this thing is completely monolithic. This is all one piece. There's no separation between the stock or receiver extension and the receiver. There's no break between the pistol grip and the receiver. Trigger guard is all integrated. Basically, this has been more reinforced and has been designed from the ground up to be polymer. Now, if you want to know more on the design choices, KE Arms, InRange TV, and Forgotten Weapons have all done, well, I should say KE Arms, Sinestro Rifleman, have all done really in-depth videos on how they kind of got to this design. So I'm not going to try to go too deep into that. I'll have links to the videos down below that are relevant here. But basically, suffice to say that this thing has proven to be a lot more durable through a lot more rounds for a lot of people because of its design to be built the way that it is, which relieves all of the concerns that I have regarding its longevity or durability. So working from the rear here of what is actually going on, we have basically an A2 style backplate, and it's an A1 length buttstock here. I know some people think that's too long. Honestly, it's been perfectly comfortable for me. Again, I don't want to beat it to death, but they do go into why they determined this length on the KP-15. And a lot of that just comes to where people will, even with an adjustable stock, set their length of pull. And it always seems to be right around M16A1 length. Now, if you buy the complete What Would Stoner Do rifle, these lowers now come with a trapdoor compartment in here because this is relatively hollowed out. It's got reinforcements, but there is a large hollow cavity in there. So you could store things in there if you want. When I ordered this one, it was before all that, obviously being pre-ordered when they were first released. So I just have a regular back plate here. You can purchase it after the fact to retrofit it if you want. I may or may not. My whole thing with this is keeping it lightweight, so I probably don't want to stick anything in the rear, ladies, but throwing that out there. Now, one other thing here you'll see is the way I have my sling integrated. They have a hole here cut through the side that perfectly fits a sling. This is a Faro Concepts Slingster. However, if I remember correctly, this is wide enough to accept like blue force gear slings, Magpul slings, anything like that. So you have a lot of options there for sling mounting. It's going to be hard to do anything QD all the way back here. There's allowances for that here forward, but just soft looping it in has worked very well for me. You can kind of do it in whatever configuration you want. Moving forward, again, if you did want to run a QD sling, especially in like a single point configuration, you have these little holes here that are drilled out so you can install one of the Magpul QD sockets. If you wanted to run a QD sling, I've kind of left it out because, again, this has been working really well for me. Then again, my preference generally is 2-point slings. Now, moving forward, we'll go ahead and just talk about both takedown pins. So these are not captured pins. So basically, the reasoning for that, as I understand, is the channels you would have to drill in order to let that piece come through would not be realistically feasible or durable enough to be able to handle the detent and spring pressure. So they just have a little ball detent built into the pins that then retain themselves. I understand if that's a concern for you. It's not for me. Now, because they are removable, it would be nice if, kind of like HK style, there was a spot to put them in the stock just so I don't lose them if for whatever reason I have to take it apart in the field. It's kind of been a non-issue for me, but I understand why that might be an issue for other people. They are directional. There is a specific direction you want to put them in, so it's not like you can swap it around to your preference unless you did some modification, which I don't see much point in doing personally. The pistol grip, like I said, is fully integrated into this, so there's no replacing the pistol grip. There is also no storage compartment in the pistol grip. To me, as far as the grip angle, it works perfectly when integrated into the length of pull here. A lot of the issues that people have with grip angle mostly relate to what length of pull they like to run. When guys run it really short, they like it more vertical. When guys run it really long, they like it more angled. Because my length of pull is fixed, this grip angle is seemingly to me appropriate. And even then, a lot of the times that I think a whole lot about the way a grip feels or performs, kind of I forget about when I actually start shooting it. Reference a CZP10C video that I'm going to be doing for my employer. Never liked the grips, and then I started shooting it and I realized I didn't even notice the grips, for what that's worth. Now, before I go too far forward here, the receiver extension, or what would be the receiver extension where your buffer tube and spring ride, is actually carbine length, even though I have the fixed stock. What that allows for is more reinforcement back here. Don't know why I couldn't think of that word. That then allows this to not beat through this whole rear section. There are people who are actually shortening these down, and rumor has it that KE Arms is going to be making shorter length of pole ones. I don't know the legitimacy of that, but it is what it is. I have opted to go with the Silent Spring kit from JP Enterprises, if I remember. I think that's what their name is. JP, whatever, whether it's Enterprises or not. And it's been working really well for me. I opted to bypass the buffer detent, kind of, again, in keeping with the whole what would Stoner do concept, and it's been working just fine. You can run a traditional spring and buffer though if you want, and you can run a buffer, like a traditional one with a buffer detent if you wanted. It comes with an extra roll pin to hold it in place since you don't have the same retention with the buffer tube for the detent. If you buy one of these, there's a whole manual thing that kind of comes with it that explains all the things that you kind of have to do differently for these and what workarounds they've provided for you to make it work. Speaking of which, we'll go ahead and touch on the safety here. So the safety, well, let me preface by saying you can order these already put together if you wanted to, or you can order them stripped. My preference is seemingly now stripped, or at least if it comes pre-assembled, get the one that has their ambi safety already installed. I have a Radian Talon in here just because that's kind of my favorite safety at the moment, and I have it set to the 45-degree throw because with my little Whopper Junior hands, it's easier for me to do that on either side. Now the thing is, and the reason I say buy one either assembled with the ambi safety or put in an ambi safety on a stripped one, once you get your safety in, it's effectively in there for good. There's no real way to take it out because the spring and detent that retain that safety bar, you have to install first, and you install from the top, there's no access from the bottom. So once you slide that safety drum over that, really the only way to get that back out is to drill through your safety bar to let that detent come through. So pick one you think you're gonna like and put it in there. This is not the time to buy or just use the cheap mil-spec one from your lower parts kit if that's not what you want to use long term. Just get one you know you like and just go with it from there. Now, moving from the safety to the trigger, this is compatible with any trigger system that you want. I happen to have a Geissele G2S in this just because that's my favorite trigger at the moment. While this is reinforced, so it can take a longer hammer pin should you want, I just have the factory Geissele trigger pin in there, so it does not extend all the way through, and that's totally fine, at least according to what KE Arms has said. That's totally fine. You can also buy a wider pin if that's what you want to do. Where you might run into issues is if you are using a cassette style drop-in trigger, that might be harder to do because you will need a oversized or a longer or wider anti-walk pin for that top one. However, my other thing is because I can't take the safety out, I would rather use a two-piece mil-spec style trigger because I can actually get it in and out without having to take the safety out. So it's a lot easier to do maintenance or swap out my trigger if you want. So yeah, as long as you're using just a basic mil-spec trigger out of your lower parts kit, that's fine as a placeholder because again, I can get that in and out with the safety installed. Now moving forward from there, I did install the PDQ lever on this lower. I will say, unless you are someone who loves hacksaws and files like I do, and I've said in a couple videos now, buy one of the lowers that's already ambi with that installed. The complete Wood Sonority rifle already has that installed because it did take me quite a bit of filing and hacksawing to get this thing installed. However, once you do, it works fine. For me, the big thing is locking it open. I haven't really been using it to drop this bolt, I should say, but it does work really well for being able to lock the bolt open without having to change my grip or take both hands off the gun kind of a thing. Maybe I'll demonstrate that here in a second. The magazine release is your same standard magazine release slot. I happen to have one of the CMMG ambi mag releases in here. I wanted to make this gun as ambidextrous as possible, kind of again going back to that whole what would Stoner do concept. And again, that's been working just fine. I actually have that in a couple lowers now. Moving forward to the magwell, as you can probably tell, this is a big old magwell. This thing is very, very flared, and again, why not? Like if you're gonna be designing a lower from the ground up, again to be polymer, why not give yourself as large of a feeding hole as you possibly can, as long as it doesn't diminish like form or function. And at least from my experience so far, that has not been an issue, but it does make my reloads very, very easy. I just throw a magazine in the general vicinity of this magwell and it finds its way in. I can probably roll in quite a bit of footage of that happening. Again, forward takedown pin is not captured, but that's kind of the lower in a nutshell. Again, there are things you have to be aware of, and there are things that I think could be slightly refined. However, I like these enough that now that they are making OD green ones, I'm probably going to be picking up another one of these because they're very, very reasonably priced. That's kind of a big thing for me to gloss over at this point. You can buy a completely assembled one with a mil-spec lower parts kit for about 200 bucks, and you can buy the stripped ones for about 100 bucks. And it's especially for the stripped ones when you consider you don't need a pistol grip, you don't need a receiver extension, you don't need a stock, castle nut, or end plate. That's a really, really good buy for 100 bucks. And they do also have these in flat dark earth, and again, OD at least temporarily. I need to jump on that before they run out of OD ones, because it sounds like that's kind of a limited run. Now, obviously it's compatible with your standard uppers, so I'm gonna throw this thing back on here. talk amongst yourselves. All right, so I have just a standard BCM upper, just your regular run-of-the-mill threaded upper. And again, everything has been working really well here. And just to demonstrate using that PDQ lever, we get closer to camera here. If I pull back on the charging handle, push up on the PDQ lever, I can lock it open. And if I wanted to, I can also use it to drop the bolt back forward. Again, I've honestly actively tried to do that, and I have a harder time than just using my thumb on the ping pong paddle like traditional ways go. So again, I have quite a bit of time in with this lower now. Hopefully you'll have seen some of that in the shooting footage, but so far I'm very, very happy with this thing, and we'll be doing a lot more videos on this whole thing, as well as a kind of complete overview of what my What Would Stoner Do gun is. As you can probably tell, quite a few departures from the official, but something I'm very, very, very happy with, and has really challenged a lot of my preconceived notions about AR-15s and how they should be configured. So anyway, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, go ahead and throw that in the comment section down below. Obviously, this is a sample of one, so if you have experience with a KE arms lower, the KP-15 specifically, throw that in the comment section down below, like how many rounds you have through it, if you've taken it through classes or competitions, and just what you like or may not like about the lowers, because again, I can only test out one here, and we need as much input as possible, because at very least, I'm a huge fan of this one, and if KE Arms can improve upon it, seeing as much feedback should hopefully help them do that in the future. So again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, throw them in the comment section down below. I do want to say thanks to my patrons over on Patreon for helping to make a video like this one possible. Obviously, ammo is not cheap or readily available. However, with their help, I've been able to actually get a bunch of rounds through this thing, again, now over 1,000, as well as take it through a training class with the Task Collective, which I had a lot of fun at, and this thing ran very, very well. And having that nice lightweight just made it really easy to hold in the shoulder while running around with a tourniquet on my other arm. But anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.
X-ray, X-ray! That's that muzzle. Let's go fix it. Look where we're at in the cover. Look where we're at in the cover. Got to figure it out. 4, 4, 4! Fix it, let's go, get back in the fight, let's go! 1, 1, 1! This is a bad day.